Welcome to An Expansive Life conversation with results architect SANDE GOLGART. Your journey to realignment from fear to freedom starts now. Live an expansive life.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Just getting ready for this particular show. I was feeling like an amazing amount of enthusiasm and energy. So I'm going to try and kind of pull it back a little bit so it's not, too much, in everybody's face. But we have an amazing show. I'm so excited to share again a part two of everything that I learned in 2025. And the reason that I think that that's so important is probably among many things that I learned is that our souls are here to grow. Our souls are not, and actually they will reject the idea of staying stagnant. And that's where we start to feel suffering. But when you start to expand and you start to really grow, you start to widen your awareness, see patterns, learn more about yourself, dissolve any illusions that you have any problems, your soul feels it. And my soul is on like overdrive today. So um, that's where all this excitement is coming from. Again, I'm extremely excited to be able to share all of this with you. But before we get into the content that I've prepared, I wanted to make a couple of announcements. We have 3 shows coming up in the very near future that I'd love for you to consider putting on your calendar now. So next Tuesday, we have a dear friend of mine who's for 3 decades been an unbelievable mentor, somebody I look up to, somebody I've learned from. Tim Sanders is going to join the live conversation. Tim is the person responsible for crashing the internet in the very late 90s, maybe right around 2000. But he was the one that streamed the first Victoria's Secret show. He's now gone on to do some amazing things. He wrote the book Love is a Killer App. And he also now is an expert at AI. So he's going to share what it means and how we can use, leverage, and understand AI to live a more expansive life. So he's coming up. That's next Tuesday. I believe it's the 27th. So put that on your calendars. We have Sandra True, who is an amazing transformational spiritual healing coach who lives in Miami. She's phenomenal. I've followed her content for a long time. She's coming on the show to talk about an expansive life and what that means coming from a place of love. So she will be joining us February 10th, right before Valentine's Day. Couldn't be more appropriate. And then Colleen Rue, who is the voice of the mountain. She's an amazing lady that I met when I was doing my 29029 hike last summer in Sun Valley, and she does the commentary on the mountain. So she does that for Ironman, she does it for 29029 and many events, and she's an endurance athlete herself. She has and is going to join the show to share with us kind of the amazing stories that she's seen of people going through incredible transformations while doing these events, and talk from a perspective about how can we be the person that's on the mountain and bring that person into our daily lives. So, when you're on the mountain and you're doing one of these events, like you see a fellow human being suffering, struggling, it's amazing how quickly you are, without even thinking, you want to go up and help people. You want to be all you can be for yourself and be all you can be for others. And on the mountain, that seems to come out so much more freely, where we're not worried about what people are saying, thinking. We're just in it together with a common goal. And so she'll talk again from that perspective. So those are the 3. She's coming up in later in February. So 3 incredible shows. Mark them on your calendar and get ready. You'll obviously see the announcements come out as we normally do. But those are 3 shows I'm really looking forward to after today's. But for now, we've got today's show. Before we start in with all the content, I'd like to just go through 3 quick box breaths and just make sure that we're all fully present. Again, our lives get extremely busy. We've got so much going on. It's so important to settle in so that I can be with you and you can be wherever it is that you want to be in this conversation, and do it intentionally. So really quickly, in less than a minute, we'll do 3 box breaths. I'll go ahead and lead. And on my count, you're going to go in through the nose for 4. You're going to hold your breath for 4, and you're going to exhale for 8. And we'll do that 3 times, and then we'll dive into the materials. So on my lead, let's go in through the nose for 2, 3, 4, and then hold your breath. 2, 3, 4, and then a big exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then again in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, and then big exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And last one, in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, and then a big exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we have arrived. Again, welcome. So I've got tons of material to go through, but I wanted to start by just, for those that might be new to this broadcast and the podcast, give you a little bit of information about who I am, kind of the journey that I've been on, and kind of a little bit about what makes me somewhat qualified to talk about what I'm talking about. And so for my journey, about 5 years ago, I was getting some massive headaches. I won't go too far back in my journey, but just starting 5 years ago. And it happened anytime I took a sip of alcohol. And so I went to the doctors, couldn't find anything wrong with me. Through a process of elimination, we ended up requiring a CAT scan. So I went to the CAT scan, had that done, fortunately could sit in that tube for 30 minutes. And on my way home, I remember feeling like, wow, what if this comes back as a diagnosis I don't want? What if it comes back, as there is something more major going on and maybe this is it? And I remember going, wow, like if that was the case, I was 47 at the time. Have I lived a fully expansive life? And I remember negotiating with myself. I remember trying to convince myself, and I have, and I'm so grateful for all the life experiences that I have, the wonderful people I've met, the things that I got to do. 30 years roughly as an executive in the corporate world. And I remember like going, yeah, it's been pretty cool and it's been good. And, if the diagnosis comes back negative or, not the way that I want, it's been okay. But I could feel an emptiness, inside that said, if you're really honest, have you emptied the tank? Have you lived life to its fullest? Have you given everything, all of your karma, to doing whatever it is that you're here to do? And I remember just kind of having to acknowledge that was clearly not the case. And I said to myself on my drive home, no matter how that comes back, I'm dedicating the rest of my life to living it as fully, as expansively as I possibly can. And I vowed to empty the tank. With whatever time I have left, I'm going to empty the tank and do it fully. And it sparked this unbelievable curiosity. And I started feeling like I was being pulled somewhere, which was different than I had felt in a long time. It's something I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. And I was just pulled to like, all right, cool. If you want to see what's in the tank, like, let's go exploring. And I bring that up because I think curiosity is something that, we have as a child, but as an adult, we start to lose it. We start to become limited in what we believe, and our beliefs actually become our biggest limitations. And we get kind of constricted. We kind of think that we know things about life, but those things we think are our limitations. The known is kind of way more limited than the unknown. And I remember just feeling like this kind of giddiness of, wow, I get to go and explore. And, I want to find out what life is all about. Are there any hidden secrets? Are there things about me that I could learn? Are there things I could do and experiences I could have, people I could meet that weren't currently in my circle to really expand out? And I remember hearing this one quote, and the quote was from Rumi. And Rumi said, "When I chase after what it is I think I want, my life becomes a furnace of stress and anxiety. But when I sit in silence, I realize that what I want also wants me, is looking for me, and will find me without pain." And I was like, wow, I don't know what that means, but I have to figure that out. And that has been probably my biggest driving force of really paying attention and creating awareness for, am I chasing something I think I want? Am I chasing a symptom? Or am I really focused on becoming the best version of myself, creating like an internal ecosystem that's going to produce amazing results, lead me to a more expansive life? And I just started with that curiosity. So with that, one of the first patterns that I started to recognize was this idea, I guess you would call it, but this observation is probably a better way of putting it, that, as humans, I think we would all agree, if we were to prioritize what's most important to us, number one would be our health. Number two would be relationships. And number three would be our wealth. And I think if we gave it some thought, we would probably all come to that same conclusion. But the observation that I made is, we are all, and I say we, and I'll focus on myself, I was chasing wealth at the expense of my health and at the expense of relationships. And we become so fixed on thinking that maybe money will solve the problems. And then I remember listening to Sean Achor. I was in Chicago. I had the privilege of listening to him speak, and he wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage. He went to Harvard to study happiness. And he said, like, all these different studies that have been done in Harvard and throughout all these major institutions prove that happiness is not found by anything that you're chasing. It happens before. In other words, you become happy, and therefore you are happy. And then from that place, you can go out and be the creator. You can create whatever it is you want in your life, but you're not doing it to try to find happiness. You become happiness and then create whatever it is you want in life. But so often, I think it's difficult in life because we feel like, I'll be happy when, I'll feel satisfied when, I'll know that I have enough when. And it's just not the case. Even peace, something that I've learned and experienced for myself. If you want peace in your life, you don't look externally and say, when this person starts acting this way, when they start saying these things, when they can see from my perspective, they'll finally get it, and then I'll be peaceful. That's a fool's errand. And I learned, you don't find peace, you remember that you are peace. And so rather than seek to find peace or find happiness or find love, you look inside of yourself and you remove everything. You see within, what do I have inside of me that is in resistance to peace, in resistance to love, in resistance to abundance of wealth? And you just start removing those things, and slowly you start to rise, and you become peace, you become love, you become success, and then your world becomes those things. And you start opening gateways of creativity and ways to make that, a part of your life. So with those three buckets, I started to get super curious about my health. And what could I do to put health as a number one priority? And the number one thing I found for both, for health, for relationships, and for wealth, is relax. Relax. Everything is working out. The only thing that is making you think otherwise is your imagination imagining a future that you might not want, which is putting you into a state of stress, fight or flight, and creating tension or suffering because you don't like the way things are right now. And you're worried about a future that you're imagining that's only in your mind. So when you get and you learn to be like fully present, you realize everything is exactly the way it is. Peter Crone actually says, everything is the way it is, only always. So if you are in resistance to the way things are, the way life has unfolded and the way it's unfolding for you, you will feel stress. You'll feel dis-ease. You'll feel a tension inside of you that makes you look at the world from a perspective of dis-ease, stress, as though something's wrong. And when we feel like there's something wrong, that's the lens now that we perceive everything, and then we get stressed. And when you get stressed, it creates inflammation in your system and in your body, which creates room for disease to start to inoculate, incubate, start to spread, and that's where disease comes from. And so as I was really exploring that and experimenting with it, I came across Ayurveda, which is a 5,000 to 6,000 year old science. It's a Hindu science that's been around, for thousands of years. And I was blown away. And what I learned through starting to dabble with it was we all have a unique constitution, meaning I'm built of different elements than everybody else and kind of unique to myself. And the more you can understand your own constitution, your own build and makeup, meaning your physical body, you'll learn there are different ways to treat your body, different things that you are prone to that you might call your strengths, and then different things that you'll see start to manifest when you get out of balance. So for me, I started to see that, wow, when I'm in balance, I have this great way of organizing things. I can go after, pursue different things. I can build systems. I can do some very expansive things. But when I'm out of balance, whether it's my diet, whether it's how much stress I'm allowing myself to have, I can become very out of balance. And when I'm out of balance, I can carry a lot of stress. I'm a fire element, and that can lead to tension, friction, the need to control. And I could look back at my past and go, oh, I could see that. But rather than thinking like something's wrong with me, because that's just part of my constitution, you can learn how to bring those things into balance so that you're living from a place of harmony. And when you're in harmony, that's when life is like really flowing. So Ayurveda was one of those things that just blew me away. I became like an immediate practicer, and I started to change my diet. I used to love like really spicy food. I'd put spicy hot sauce on everything, hot peppers, you name it. But when I learned more about my constitution, those are the things that trigger me to get out of balance. Those are the heated elements that cause me to create more friction, more force, more living from the ego, not relaxed. So I replaced all of those things with very cooling foods like avocado, cucumber, and immediately my whole makeup started to shift. And then I started to not need to work out. I just started to become healthy. Is like removing the things that were keeping me from being healthy actually made me more healthy. So then I went on to the next one, which was relationships. And again, this is over a 5-year journey. And I wrote down some different things for the way that I really wanted to feel. And accessing that can be so much more powerful, certainly for me. And the invitation is to explore this for yourself. But if I decide how I want to feel, there's a whole different range of emotions and actions that lead to the results that you want. And I remember for relationships, I said and wrote down, like, I want to feel this like amount of love, call it unconditional love. I want to feel that. And being married at the time, I asked my wife, can you do this? Could you love me unconditionally? And this was something that I struggled with for probably 25 years. I sort of knew the answer, but I didn't want to ask. And I don't know how many of you listening have things like that in your life where you're afraid of the answer. You don't want it, so you don't ask. You pretend like everything's okay. So finally, I had the courage to ask the question, and I got the answer that I knew for a long time. And she said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't love you unconditionally," which led to discussions about, getting a divorce and separating and supporting each other, going our own ways, and kind of living our own lives where our energy was pointed, being our most expansive selves, being true to ourselves. And I remember just thinking, like, God, that something I was so afraid of hearing the answer, but it was actually more liberating than it was anything to be afraid of. I went on then to learn the reason someone couldn't love me fully and couldn't love me unconditionally is I started to realize I didn't love myself unconditionally. I wasn't in love with all parts of me, the parts that, can be heated, that can cause friction, that need to, slip into periods of control from my ego. And it made me even more curious. Well, how can I get underneath that? How could I learn even more about myself? And that created this whole exploration that I went on, just studying like human behavior, the subconscious with Carl Jung, the way that we relate to circumstances and people, which I first got from Einstein, and then I had clarified through my relationship with Peter Crone, and started to realize, like, again, through the theory of relativity, where you can experience life through your own perspective, and that just gives you your perspective. But you really have to make room for and understand that everyone else is experiencing the same events, same circumstances, and people from their own unique perspective. So Einstein's thought experiment, which I think is really cool, and just bear with me for a minute while I describe it. His thought experiment was that a person on a high-speed train traveling towards the horizon at a very high speed might see lightning strikes off in the distance and see them as happening simultaneously. Somebody else from a fixed location might see those same lightning strikes as one after another. And when you ask each individual, what happened? The guy on the train would say, well, I saw those lightning strikes and they happened at the exact same time. The person at the fixed location would say, no, they didn't. I saw it. They happened one after another. And you can start to see where arguments and the ego's need to be right creates this need to fight for what your perspective is. But who's actually right? They're both right. The person on a fixed location saw what they saw. The person on the high-speed train saw what they saw. They're both right. So you can start to make room for, and this is how it relates to relationships, somebody who came from a different environment, maybe a different neighborhood, with different levels of awareness, different role models, different levels of education, different religion. Maybe they're from different parts of the world, would experience the same circumstance different from the way you experience just by where you were born, who were your parents, what religion or not religion you were brought up in, will cause you to see things and experience and relate to a circumstance different from someone else. Well, who's right? You're both right from your relative experience, awareness, and the way that you have been raised. And I just remember feeling like, how cool is that when you realize you're not right? There's actually no right or wrong. It's just the way that you relate to circumstance from your own perspective. And immediately I felt this really cool feeling that we could expand and make room for the idea that different people can experience the same circumstance different and both be right. And it just was a fascinating realization for me that we could make room and realize that nobody is right or wrong. They're just experiencing life from their perspective of their upbringing, their past, their circumstance, their level of awareness, and we could be okay with that. And then it led me to really understand that there's nothing wrong with anybody. And so often for myself, I was living life observing other people, and I'd go like, well, they're wrong. Oh my God, look at what they're doing. Where you're judging and you're creating these opinions about what it is other people are doing to make yourself feel okay. But when you realize through that, like theory of relativity, you realize they're just experiencing life and acting in accordance to their own, past traumas, history, and levels of awareness. They're not right or wrong. That's just from their perspective, the way they feel. And who am I to say my opinion is better because it's only from my own relative circumstance than somebody else? And if you really allow yourself to go deep, you'll realize like we create wars. We kill other human beings because of the need to prove that we're right. And who's to say that we are right? Which starts to make room for love. And you start to realize like everyone is just doing what they're doing. I have no reason to shame, blame, criticize. And I can start to think from inside, how can I be love and be fully accepting of the way everyone else is acting, what they're doing, what their opinions are? I don't have to believe them for myself, but I can make room for and I can honor that that is their reality. I can understand the way they feel about a situation, other people, me, and know that I don't have to be right. I can just be. I can say, well, I'm choosing to live my life this way. It doesn't mean that you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that I'm right. It's the way that I'm choosing to move forward. And you start to realize that there is no right or wrong when it comes to decisions. There are just consequences. And I was able to then start to really see and understand human behavior from a sense of patterns. I can recognize human patterns. And like Carl Jung will say, and he's often quoted as saying, uh, people, what does he say? Until your subconscious becomes conscious, your life will unfold, and you'll call it fate. But it's really because you haven't recognized your own patterns, which are triggered from the way that you think and the way that you feel, which cause you to act a certain way from your perspective. And it creates patterns, and you'll be stuck in those patterns until you can create the awareness to see, I keep doing and acting the same way, and I keep producing the same results. So if you really want to grow and you want more in your life, you have to have the ability or develop the ability to recognize those patterns, recognize your own self-belief or lack thereof, your own lack of love for yourself and others, and start to change the way that you are acting, change your behaviors, which will produce different predictable results. And I just thought like that was so unbelievably cool. And I'll get into a tool that I've created or a method for teaching this that might be of interest to many of you tuning in, which I would invite you to explore after I talk about the next part, which is wealth. So now from a place of liberation, where you start to liberate your soul, you start to realize there are no problems. There's just this illusion that problems exist. You can make space for everybody. You can make space for honoring other people's reality and live from this place of freedom. You're now free to create. And that just hit me as when you get to that place, you start to realize I don't necessarily need anything. And when you don't need anything, you realize that you are no longer like manipulatable. And you're more difficult. It's more difficult to manipulate you, and you can start to live from a place of I don't need, I actually want, I choose to act the way that I want to act. And this is such a more powerful place that I found for me to become the creator of how much wealth I want. And so in starting up, my own business, one of the big challenges that I've had is trying to go too big, too fast. And in learning and getting more and more curious about this, I've realized that the best way to create an expansive business is to employ what I call this compression. There's compression before expansion. So focus on something very, very, very narrow and focus. Can I add value? Can I create value and do it with a very small sample? And if I get that right and I can extract and create tremendous value, from that place, I can then start to expand and create a very expansive business and create very expansive wealth. So part of the work that we're doing is creating an education library and community where we will be able to invite people in to take a look at any one of those priorities, whether it's your health, whether it's relationships or wealth. I've documented this whole journey, and you'll be able to learn some of these principles and start to go deep and unlock what's there for you so that you can find your own path for creating the best, healthiest version of yourself, the best relationships for yourself, including the relationship with yourself, reach a place of pure freedom where there's nothing but pure possibility, and then follow a structure for creating the business or helping another business create expansive wealth. And I think that will help so many people take steps and do it in a very safe way, and at their own pace to create the life that they really want, not the one where they think they want three things, but they act differently. So I'm super excited about that community. And as it relates to how we would do that, we're going to start again with a very compressed audience. And it's going to originally be, for starters, for men going through like a midlife divorce. And it's something that I know a lot about. And I know how to move from your victim's energy, where you think things are happening to you, expand out into your ego's energy, where you start to want to force a different outcome, and then move all the way out to your soul's energy. And in a few minutes, I'll walk you through how you can do that, because we've all been there, and like life can feel really, really hard. It's felt really hard for me, and there are days when I'll still slip into a mode where it feels really hard. What I've learned to recognize is that that is just an illusion in your head. It's a story that you're telling yourself, and your body is reacting, so it feels sluggish. It feels like you don't have energy, but you have access to unlimited energy. So I'll show you a really quick example of how you can get there so that you can start to engineer and become the creator of your own life, but by learning how to better relate to circumstance and people, create space and actually move all the way out in your soul's energy to this place of growth, pure possibility, and love, where you don't need anybody in the external world to act a certain way, to say certain things or not say them for you to be okay. And you will become peace. You will become love. And actually, it's the process of remembering that that's who you've always been. And there's really no need to become it. That's who you are. That's what your soul is. Your soul is peace. Your soul is love. Your soul doesn't have any hate in it. You can remember when you were a kid. And you'll be able to return back to that mind where you're completely free to do whatever you want and create the most expansive life for yourself. So, with that, we will be launching this expansive life community, which I referenced back in December. And we're going to do it to start with midlife men who are going through a divorce, because it's such a difficult time in your life where it creates so much change and it has so much packed inside of it. So, Jason, if you can, maybe we can bring up that image. Amazing. Thank you. How's that? Okay. Maybe I can do that too. Okay. So what you're looking at on the screen, this is something that's called the Fibonacci spiral. The golden spiral can also be like the spiral of life. What's amazing about this is this shape, amazingly, shows up all throughout nature and all throughout the universe. With galaxies, you can probably envision a galaxy. You can probably envision like a hurricane. You can probably envision like a snail or a seahorse tail. But this um, kind of shape shows up all throughout nature naturally. And it's been given one of the names as the Fibonacci spiral. We're playing around with it as like expansive awareness spiral. And I use it, this came to me actually in a dream, to show me how I could better relate just in going through my own divorce. And, you know, I had what I thought created this like really loving space for my wife and I, now ex-wife, to go through this period and create like a safe harbor, a soft landing, help support each other, and really go through this from a place of love. And some events unfolded going through that process, which I now understand are directly related to the subconscious. But I remember going through and having these events unfold, and I remember going, what the hell is going on? And I started to think, like, how could this person be acting, this way? And I was kind of beside myself. And then I was actually, entering these moments of fear where I was like, I literally can't believe it. I can't believe another person could be this mean, this cruel, and looking at it from my own perspective. And what I realize now is I was operating at the very center of this tightly wound spiral. So imagine this is a very constrictive, almost claustrophobic space. And this is where I would say you're most in your victim's energy. This is where you feel like life is happening to me. It feels very unfair. It feels, and hopefully you can relate to some part of your life where we as humans have experienced this, where you feel like because someone said something or because they did something, it feels like it's happening to me. And you're trying to grasp control, and your ego is saying, we need to go prove that we're right. And if you go back to the relationship section, this is often where relationships get in trouble. You feel like you're right from your perspective, and how could this other person act this way? And how could they be doing these things? And you only, your brain resorts to, and your nervous system resorts to your sympathetic nervous system, which is in fight or flight, and the ego wants to fight. You want to control the situation. You want to prove that you're right. And this is often where fighting, disagreements, happen. And what I was really fortunate to see is that the only way through this was to reach a place of peace, not because I needed someone else to act a certain way, but internally, I needed to find peace. And so I again started to realize I could slowly start to expand out from the center of this tightly wound, claustrophobic place and expand out with slightly higher levels of expansive awareness and start to see things maybe from the other person's perspective and say, back to Einstein's theory, if I was on the high-speed train and I swear two lightning bolts happened at the same time and someone else is like, no, they didn't, they happened one after another, could I make room for the fact that maybe this person is just going through something? Maybe this is the way they're grieving, maybe tied to their own subconscious, a need to feel safe. And maybe they're entering a place of survival and fear. And they're not doing this to me. They're doing it to try to survive. And I started to kind of have this aha moment of, wow, like I could actually start to have empathy, sympathy for this person and say, maybe I can just start to give them space, allow them to act the way they're acting, and know it has no impact on me. The only thing that would have impact on me would be in my mind, how I think it's unfolding and how I think it might be unfair to me. And slowly I was able to unwind after a lot of practice and expand all the way out into my soul's energy, where I could realize it's not just happening, it's actually happening for me. Life is presenting me with this circumstance which is filled with opportunities for me to take full responsibility for my life, the way things are unfolding. And I can also take responsibility of how I react to it and make sure that on the other side of this separation, I could put myself in a position to be the best version of myself, a healthy, healed version. And I could start to look at myself and say, okay, if life presents you with circumstances and people to show you where you're not liberated, what's this showing me? What's the mirror that life is providing me with? And I got to start seeing all these opportunities for me to look inside and say, why am I stuck here? Why is my soul not liberated? Why do I have a problem with the way this person is acting? And I started to see some of the shadow sides of myself. And these were opportunities for me to go in, look at myself, look at areas of opportunity where I could find more harmony and bring myself into a state of harmony, and then find peace. And I had the most profound experience right around the new year, where I was kind of struggling with some of the way things were going and maybe imagining what things were being said. But the reality was that I didn't know. It was my imagination kind of playing with me. And when you start to realize it's nothing more than just your imagination, you don't know, you can, again, expand out, widen, create more and more and more awareness. And then it hit me. If I want peace out of this situation or anything else in life, I have to become peace. Which then hit me as not become peace, but remember that I am peace. And I started looking for all the things within me that were in the way of peace. And it was things like feeling like this had to go a certain way for me to be okay with it. I had to come out of this a certain way, and be right about my perspective for me to be okay. And I started to slowly let go of all those things and realize someone else is on the other side. They're experiencing life. They're experiencing this, and they're also experiencing their own grieving. Can I just let them unfold, allow life to unfold the way it is, and be okay with that? And I was overcome with the most amazing amount of peace that I've never felt in my life, and better than any drug that I can possibly imagine might be out there. I entered this unbelievable state of euphoria, realizing I am peace. And everything in the whole world at that moment felt unbelievably peaceful. And for 2 days, I was on the most amazing high I've ever been on, just going, life is freaking amazing. And then, as the ego and your mind starts to work, I started to kind of slowly get back out of that. And my ego's telling me, well, this isn't really safe. And, let's look for what's wrong. And so as a human being, you do drift back and you go back into the tightly wound spiral. But this tool has taught me to recognize the energy I'm drifting back into. Anytime I feel amount of dis-ease, I know that I'm slipping back into either my ego's energy or worse, my victim's energy, where I feel like something happened to me. And it doesn't mean that you'll feel better necessarily, but you will recognize that's where I'm living. And so if I'm living there, I can go, okay, why do I feel this? What's there for me? And I can sit with it and start to get curious and know that my objective is to expand back out and get back to this place of love and peace where you're way more powerful as a being. And so I've used this repeatedly, and this is one of the best ways that I have found for finding peace, in your life. And I think ultimately the game of life is finding peace. And if you have your priorities where you're healthy, you've got amazing relationships, most importantly with yourself, and you are creating wealth and you're creating as much as you want, but from a place of peace, like you've won the game of life, as far as I'm concerned. And that for me is such a healthy structure and a healthy place to create from and to ultimately live from. So one of the next phases of the business that we're creating is expansive leadership. And I'll touch on this probably for a little bit, and then we'll open it up, see if there's any questions or what's come up for anybody. And feel free to leave any comments, in the chat. On the public chat, feel free to raise your hand, ask Jason to be brought on stage. He can give you the link so that you can show up, and I'm happy to share the stage with you and have a conversation. But I've started to think about this from a place of leadership, and how can we go into corporate America and help people understand the power of diversity, the power of working with people, making room for them so that they can lead by making space for appreciating and understanding everyone is just acting the way they're acting. And inside of everybody, they have these amazing skills. How can we get them to feel more free to express them, pour those things into their work, establish a higher level of purpose with the work that they're doing, realizing that they're completely free. They're an amazing, boundless, limitless soul. Imagine the kind of work, productivity that we could create in this world when we get corporations to embrace this level of leadership. When you become an expansive leader, you become unbelievably clear about what it is that you're creating when it comes to value. And you start to create alignment around that. And you start to make sure that the people on the team, the people you're interacting with, have the same drive and the same determination and purpose for unlocking the value of what the company does to help people. Then you can make room for their way of doing it. You can make room for their opinions. You can make room for their expressive nature, where you give them permission to disagree with you and create, debate. And you can hold space for that. You can welcome it. And you're moving out of force. So I want everyone, just think about any time in your life at any job when you had a boss where you felt like they were manipulating you or trying to force you to do something. How did that make you feel? It's not a great feeling. You feel the manipulation. You feel this, oh my God, I have to do what they're telling me or else. And then they'll ratchet up the fear, the level of fear to say, if you don't do it, you're getting fired. You're getting let go. You're going to be ostracized in the community. People will look at you, a certain way. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want that. I want to belong. I want to be a part of it. So you look down, you do your job, and the work suffers. You're just going through the motions, and you're really not delivering the best result for you. You're not delivering the best result for your company. And then you're forcing that leader to look at symptoms, and they're just looking at revenue, sales, profit, and then they move into a mode where they're trying to force different outcomes to create the symptoms that they want: more revenue, more profit. But if we could get a couple of leaders to embrace this, a couple of HR departments, and really look at building a culture where it comes from an expansive place, imagine how powerful that company could be. And there's certainly many, many examples of companies doing this well. But I would assert that far more are operating from a place of force and fear, trying to manipulate their employees to doing what they think is needed, the way they think is needed. And we're losing all of the power that exists in doing it from a place of freedom and a place of like real creativity, where you could pour your soul, into your work and really become like the creator. So I'm incredibly excited about that. We just started an outreach program this week to connect with senior vice president executives within HR to start to explore this. So we're looking for a few, really from a point of compression, where we could pour our expertise and help them by coaching, different leaders, and realizing how much more powerful they can be when they're leading from a place of values, and leading from a place of like joint collaboration towards a mission of unlocking value, not forcing, not manipulating customers to sign up, not putting these crazy manipulative practices that keep people on subscriptions when they don't want them, and all this other stuff that businesses are doing to try to create the symptom which they want, which is just more revenue. So I couldn't be more, excited about the potential that has to create the ripple effects throughout the entire universe, if you will, but certainly within the US and the rest of the world, where we can create, a platform where leaders can learn how to lead from this place of clarity, alignment, peace, and love, but be even more powerful, even more persuasive by working towards the right outcomes. I don't know about you as you're looking on, but nothing makes me more excited than to think of a world where that is happening, and more leaders are stepping away from manipulative practices and stepping more into their soul, and able to lead from a place of setting examples, taking full responsibility for themselves, taking full responsibility for the way they show up, taking full responsibility for the amount of clarity, and taking full responsibility of really finding those areas of opportunity to create real value for their customers, so that they can then become an expansive leader and an expansive company, creating expansive results. So that's a little bit about, where we're going, but I think probably for everybody on the call, I just want to, summarize and then see if there's anyone who wants to, come into the fold of this conversation, which I invite anybody to do. But it is, when you think of health, try to think of not what do I need to do to welcome in health, but what are the things inside of me that I could remove? What are the things I'm doing that are getting in the way of me being my healthiest self? When it comes to relationships, what is it that I could do for myself? Probably starting with loving myself more, giving myself a little more grace, helping myself realize how boundless, limitless I am, and anchor in that truth. And then become okay that I'm not perfect. Become okay with the fact that I'm human. And then from there, you can start to free yourself and create a person so free, you don't need anybody to act a certain way for you to be okay. You can allow people to truly just be and get better at your discernment, better at recognizing human patterns so that you're hiring the right people. You know how to help them, you know how to develop them into being stronger, better leaders. You can be a better person in your community, a better person in your circle of friends, a better person just overall, someone you can be extremely proud of by embracing all parts of yourself, all of the human side of yourself, and realizing there's nothing wrong with you. And then there's nothing wrong with anybody else. So, Jason, I don't know, I don't have it on my screen. Do we have any comments or anybody who would like to join the conversation? Okay. Well, I'll throw out the invitation before we jump off. If anyone has a comment, if anybody has a question, if anyone wants to challenge, anything that I've said or debate, I personally love doing that. And you can do it and feel safe because remember, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if there aren't any comments, if there aren't any questions, I would invite you, and we will send out the link so that you can find this community. But if you have any part of you that wants to feel and experience more peace, more love, and more power in your life, this Expansive Life community is going to be really an incredible, safe space for you to explore these things, learn them about yourself, realize what mirroring is all about and what you can learn from people and experiences that you're going through to make sure that you're taking full responsibility for yourself and you can change the way that you show up in life and start taking some steps into leading the most expansive life possible and enjoy life from a perspective and a being of true freedom where you don't need anything. You're selectively choosing the way you want to live. You're selectively choosing how you show up and who you welcome in, who you want to give energy and who you want to hold back energy from so that you can live the most expansive, amazing life possible. So I know it's can seem a little out there, but I've experienced it. I've walked the terrain. I've walked through it. And so I feel like, I'm as equipped as just about anybody to help guide people through this because I've dealt with the struggles of it. I've dealt with the terrain. I know how hard it can feel, but I also know that feeling that anything is hard is an illusion in your head. And it's something that we can clear out, help you clear out, and start to relate to all the circumstances from your history, start to dissolve them, and start to create the most amazing now that you'll ever experience. So with that, I want to thank everyone for taking the time this hour. I appreciate you sharing it with me. It's a pleasure to be able to share some of these learnings with you. I will remind you, it's not that I feel like this is the way or that I somehow have like the right equation, but it is an equation that I've found works really well for me. And if any parts of it work well for you, or you'd like to get any help, you can reach out to me at sandegolgart.com. If you want to explore, one-to-one coaching, you'd like to explore having me be your guide in your own path to freedom, I welcome that opportunity. And I promise for you, I'll show up with everything I've got and give you the tools so that you can create your own path to freedom and find what's there and what works best for you. So with that, thank you so much for tuning in. And we will see you next week when we invite Tim Sanders to share his insights on AI and how we can learn to embrace these things as we enter a massive revolution that's happening, across society, and make sure that you're on the winning side of that change that's coming. So again, thank you for everyone. Appreciate you tuning in. Jason, take us away.
Thanks for watching An Expansive Life Conversation. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.